Hello, and welcome to Chart Attack, the podcast where we jump in our great big pop time machine and select a number one single between the year 2000 and today, and we discuss it.
Hello, everyone. Back again. I'm Martin Young, and I'm here again with Abigail Firth. And on today's episode, hello, we're discussing the 2002 Christmas number one. First time we're doing a Christmas number one, and it is Girls Aloud's legendary debut single, Sound of the Underground. So that's hard for me to say, is it? Sound of the Underground.
Long episode for you.
Yes, that is better. So, Abby, are you a fan of the Girls Aloud?
I bloody love Girls Aloud. I would go as far to say as they are my favourite girl band of all time.
All time, out of all the girl bands in history of music.
Yeah.
Strong words, but yeah, I think you may.
I feel like
right.
they're justified words. I think they're so great.
Yes.
And we're going to see why as this episode goes on.
We are going to
see.
We are going to see by. We are going to go into the genesis of Girls Aloud, everything about this first song, and some other stuff that was going on during the time. So, Abby, give me some facts first. Give me some facts on Sound of the Underground.
Well, let's start with who are Girls Aloud?
Yes,
because they have been dormant for the past 10 years. They've been away for a while.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be surprised if somebody who lives in the UK doesn't know who Girls Aloud are. But if you don't, they are Cheryl, Nadine Coyle, Nicola Roberts, Kimberly Walsh, and Sarah Harding.
Yes, all legends in their own right. Yeah.
Yes. And I love that they were all Northern as well.
Yeah.
Aside from Nadine. Nadine was obviously Irish. Nadine was from Derry.
Yeah.
But Nicola's a Scouser. Kimberly Walsh is from Bradford, I believe. Cheryl from Newcastle. Sarah, obviously from Stockport. They were very working class, plucked from obscurity kind of girls. And I loved that. So their debut single, Sound of the Underground, was released on 16th of December 2002. And it went to number one thanks to the marketing campaign of the reality show that they were on, which was Popstars The Rivals. This was before X Factor, but after another show that was already on air, Fame Academy. So we're like in the depths of reality TV show talent contests.
Yeah, because you had Pop Idol, big one. Well, the first one, Popstars.
Oh yeah, of course, Pop Idol. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is kind of why, right, they done Popstars The Rivals, because the original Popstars wasn't a studio-based talent show. It was kind of the first one, and it was kind of behind the scenes, and the judges made this band, and that band were Hearsay, and it was a massive thing, and Hearsay had huge number one single, Pure and Simple, but Hearsay were not the successful band from that show. It was the Losers.
I would go as far to say that.
Yes.
Yeah. So the ones, the contestants that were kicked out went on to make Liberty X, and they were eventually more successful than Hearsay.
And that's where the concept of the rivalry sort of came from, because they were the rivals to Hearsay. So the producers were thinking,
we can't do a rivalry unless it's gender-based.
Of course, because that's the only the only sort of prism that we have to look through things, because that's how the world works. So tell me more about the song that came out of it, though, because we'll get into the show. Don't worry, we'll get into that. But tell me more about the song, Abby.
So the groups were formed on the show. They were formed by public vote, unlike another TV talent contest where the judges would put them together.
Yeah.
We did see that later on with the X Factor, with 1D, Little Mix. They were put together by professionals. So this was put together by the public, and it worked by every week. They would knock out a girl until they were left with 5.
Yeah.
Which were the 5 that I've just mentioned, who became Girls Aloud.
Yeah.
The same happened to the boys. The boys formed a group called One True Voice.
One True Voice.
Those two, the singles that they released would go head to head to see who could get Christmas number one. And then the Christmas number one would be the winner of the show. So 2 birds, 1 stone.
Yeah. A really simple concept. that people bought into and people were really excited about it. So, this is a real sort of battle. It was pitched as a battle, boys versus girls, really simple stuff. I love the girls campaign. So, bye girls, bye boys, in the fight for number one. So this is BUYBYE, bye bye bye. Yeah.
And the girls came out swinging with the curveball of the decade, because Winner Singles had a bit of a reputation for being drivel, for being like an ambitious ballad that was supposed to show hardship and determination.
Hey, Evergreen by Will Young is a really good song. But yes, it's a very distinct song, and this would become far more obvious as the talent shows sort of progressed throughout the career. But nobody was expecting this sort of single, were they?
Louis Walsh had other ideas.
Yes.
He had other ideas. He enlisted the help of Brian Higgins, who was the boss of like Hit Factory, Xenomania, who at the time they were most famous for producing Believe by Cher. And I do believe that they'd worked with Kylie, Pet Shop Boys a little bit. Yeah. But what they did with Sound of the Underground, like, completely reshaped British pop music in the 2000s. So the track was written by Miranda Cooper, Niara Scarlett, and Brian Higgins. It was originally offered to Samantha Mumba, who Louis Walsh also managed at the time. She was due to record it as her 2002 comeback song, but she went for I'm Right Here instead. But she regrets that one.
2 weeks in a row mentioned for Samantha Mumba, though. 2 weeks in a row. They mentioned her last time with the Craig David episode. So she was obviously knocking about everywhere during the time. But yeah, why did you give up on this, Samantha? Why?
And the song was actually one of 60 that Brian and Miranda had written with the aim of launching their own girl group. And eventually it was chosen by Louis Walsh, who was their mentor on the show, as Girls Aloud's debut single.
Yeah.
So it was recorded and rehearsed a week before the finals, but it was prepped well in advance. So please give us a little insight onto what was happening in the show.
Well, okay. So Popstars Rivals, you had, established concept from Pop Idol and Popstars. So you had judges. So you had Louis Walsh, who at the time was known for managing Westlife and Boyzone. So this is pre-X Factor. So it's pre sort of Louis being like a comedy sort of character. He was a serious music exec at the time who was, knew his stuff when it came to pop. But he was pitched up against the other judge who would be in charge of the boys, who was Pete Waterman. Now, Pete Waterman is very sort of notorious and well-known music figure, particularly in the 80s, as he was part of the huge production house, record label, Stock, Aitken and Waterman, who obviously were massive in launching the careers of Kylie and Jason Donovan and Rick Astley and hundreds of pop singles, which were, a lot of them were amazing, a lot of them were pretty generic, and they established a really sort of pop sound that defined the end of the 80s. So Pete Waterman had a very distinct view of pop and what it should be and how it worked, which kind of plays in to some of this. And also, Geri Halliwell of the Spice Girls, she was there as a kind of impartial judge, keeping the peace between the two factions. So,
and I assume because as well they had the two guys who were behind the scenes production men.
Yes,
they had to have someone who had the experience of being in a group, and also that people knew and cared about.
Yeah, we needed a bit of sparkle. Of course, you need a bit of sparkle, and Geri was providing that sparkle. So when you look at the show, it is incredible that Louis is consistently referred to as the young, fresh judge, and Pete Waterman is the old sort of codger, right? Despite there only being 6 years between them.
Yeah.
So as Abby mentioned before, unlike X Factor, where you had like One Direction, a little mix put together by the judges had no hand in creating the bands. It was all publicly voted, and they worked with who were selected. So there's an alternate reality for the show. What could have happened? The original winner single was going to be for the girls, Stay Another Day by E17. So just another cover that fit for sort of Christmas time. And it was on the B-side to the single. But when they discovered what Brian Higgins was doing, what Xenomania were doing, which I think maybe the key Xenomania song, which we should mention from that year, which came out previously, is Round Round by Sugar Babes.
Yeah. Round Round and Freak Like Me, I believe.
Yeah.
So Xenomania were just starting to work with the Sugar Babes at this time.
Yeah.
But obviously Sugar Babes had put themselves together and were also quite known for like writing their own stuff and being quite involved in their own process.
Yeah.
Or at least they were with Overload. So I think that it was very much a different kind of girl group.
Yeah, so this was kind of a step into the sort of unknown for everyone. So the track, so there was a lot of sniping between the judges when it came, it was a real battle for who was going to come out on top here once the winning boys and the winning girls were formed. And obviously Pete Waterman, he was, throwing some shade as he would. So he's claiming that the song that Girls Aloud released was stolen from a girl band called Orchid, who recorded it in 2001, but they never even signed a record deal. The song never actually existed beyond like record labels and industry stuff. And the original Orchid vocals, they do remain on the recording as backing singers, but it's not a song that belongs to a band.
No.
It's not a cover. This is an original song by an original group that went on to sort of change UK pop music, didn't it?
Yeah. And interestingly, like, Pete was very confident that the boys were going to win, and I think a lot of the public were expecting the boys to win as well, just because of like the popularity of boy groups at the time.
Yeah,
like Westlife. We can see that the week before this went to number one. Blue were at number one.
Yeah,
Westlife had a lot of chart success. Ronan Keating had gone solo.
There were so many boys, so many men, so many boy bands.
Obviously,
around this time. Yeah.
Boyzone Take That in the 90s as well.
Yeah.
So I think this was like the first, like as Sugar Babes and Girls Aloud were coming in, these were the first like major girl groups in the UK since the Spice Girls, and I guess All Saints as well.
Yeah, All Saints had flamed out by this point. They were like,
yeah.
So, but what? So, tell me then, Abby, like, what was the reaction at the time to the show, to the band? What were the press saying? What was the general tea at this moment?
So, interestingly, this was a bit of a turning point for the British press. This is what we were talking about a little bit last episode, like the Poptimism movement, where pop music was taken seriously as a critical entity.
Yes.
So Girls Aloud, along with the Sugar Babes and their work with Xenomania, had the attention of music critics. In quite a backwards way, a lot of the credit for how good the songs are is given to Brian Higgins, which I guess he is the mastermind behind it all, but it's the sort of thing that takes away from like the girls.
Like you listen
bringing it to life.
Yeah, you listen to his demo of the song and stuff like that. The song's there, right? It sounds like the song, but it's no good. It's flat. Doesn't have any of the magic.
We still see that kind of thing today with pop artists. It's like, oh, this Taylor Swift song is good because of Aaron Dessner, or like this Lorde song is good because of Jank Antonoff. Like it's like, no, it's good because of the pop star. Like,
and even when newer people now as well, like Flo, everyone's like, oh, MNEK is so good. He makes all these amazing songs. So it's like, yeah, it does, right? But there's someone else that's bringing sort of the magic to this,
Yeah. But ultimately, it was a good thing. Alexis Petridis, one day I will find out how to say your name. But The Guardian, he's like their main pop critic.
Yeah.
And he said that the song proved first it was a reality pop record that didn't make you want to do physical harm to everyone involved in its manufacture.
Okay.
Fair enough. I think that's a fair assessment.
Yeah.
It definitely was something different. And Caroline Sullivan, who was also at The Guardian, made a piece talking about how they were the first girl band to matter since the Spice Girls. She said that the single is an icy confection, very different from the normal run of girl band things, which I think is true as well.
Yeah, and this song stands out in terms of reality single because there's nothing else that's upbeat or like this. There is like literally nothing else.
No.
That this came
and I think
from
it's interesting as well because after Sound of the Underground, TV talent show winners, like it just went straight back to being ballads. Like when the X Factor came around, obviously their first winners like Steve Brookstein, Shane Ward, and then onwards it was like, Leona Lewis, Alexandra Burke, all did these ballads, like we were saying, these like ones that were supposed to show their journey and their ambition.
Yeah.
And it was Sound of the Underground is just like a party song.
Yeah. Like, it's a song about going to the club and hearing the music, hearing the bass, and the great tradition of pop songs that are just, literally all about the bass.
Yeah.
This is what it's like. But, like, why do you think they went back to all the ballads? Is it because, like, with someone as inventive as this, they couldn't get a handle on it? They couldn't control it in the same way, do you think?
I mean, to me, I think it was just kind of that perfect storm. There was no girl groups doing anything like this, aside from, like, the Sugar Babes just coming in and doing a similar thing. The girls and Brian Higgins worked together so well, and I think that they were just probably up for it. Well, maybe there was just like an expectation that a winner single should sound like a ballad.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think?
No, I think it's just like Girls Aloud. The song was so impactful and so sort of amazing that it kind of broke the mold from that, and they couldn't recreate that. The reality winner single would sound really bad if they tried to recreate something in this vein. Yeah. I think so. You couldn't
and
do
also,
it.
Like I say, it was kind of revolutionary, which we'll talk a little bit about later on.
Yeah.
At the time, this kind of like genre mashing and this, I don't know what you'd call it.
It's just, it's taking something.
It was just a different kind of pop music.
Yeah.
And as like we went into the 2000s and the 2010s, I think pop music is just more experimental anyway.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't ever sound as revolutionary.
Definitely. Yeah. Tell me about someone who's definitely not revolutionary in this series, and that's Pete Waterman, because Pete is he's like a big like dinosaur figure in this show.
Oh
he's not having a good time of it, Pete. Not coming out of this show looking well.
Yeah. When we say that this is like a pop time capsule, you don't understand what we're having to endure to do research for this.
Yeah.
So I went back and watched like some episodes of Pop Stars The Rivals, and it's just so weird to see him talking about these girls. Like, he's so insufferable all the way through. Like, his judging comments are just not even comments. They're just like, it's just lazy judging, and he so obviously thinks that he's so much better than the show that he's on.
Yeah.
So Louis Walsh is right when he says that Pete is out of touch with current pop. This is part of the rivalry. Like we said, Louis is supposed to be like this new, fresh face who's got like a real grasp of the current pop landscape. Which, in all fairness, he did.
He did,
because he picked this song.
Pete didn't have any hits or anything since maybe about 1993, and at this point we're in 2002. So it was like 10 years in the sort of pop sort of wilderness. He was like a celebrity. Yeah. He was obviously a judge on Pop Idol, everything like that. But he was not at the vanguard of exciting pop, certainly.
No, and Pete says in the final, it was quite clear that they were looking for style and look as opposed to great voices. The boys have worked hard at being musicians, and if that makes me old-fashioned, I'll stay old-fashioned. There's never been that much rivalry, probably because I knew I was always going to beat him. Now, he fucking ate his words and then some. Like,
egg on his face.
I hope he's sat at home with his tail between his legs thinking, I've just made a massive fool of myself on national TV. Because not only did Girls Aloud beat One True Voice to the top spot, but rather ironically, they did prove that they were very much not style over substance and actually inspired a major shift in British pop music.
Yeah.
It's just like, I think it's really misogynistic for the sake of being misogynistic.
Well, absolutely. And I think part of that is he was playing up to sort of the nasty judge role, and coupled with his out of touchness, it just made him such a terrible figure in this show.
Yeah, like all of these jibes, like all of these like saying, well, because obviously we know that Louis Walsh is famous for his "you look like a pop star, you sound like a pop star" lines.
That's a very good impression.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But that was kind of his thing during this. He was actually looking for someone, like a group that looked like a group and everything. Obviously the public like dealt him a pretty good hand.
Yeah.
But with Pete Waterman jabbing at that, and then also trying to say that the girls didn't record their own song and all this, none of that's going to save your boys from having a boring song.
Yeah, come on, Pete. Come on, Pete. You wrote "I Should Be So Lucky." You should be having more fun.
Exactly.
What's wrong with you, man?
I'm going to hand this over to you, Martin.
Yeah.
And you can tell us a little bit about what was going on in the news. Tell us a little bit about the other contestants. Take it away.
Let me tell you about some of this. So, what else was in the news at the time? Well, it's Christmas time and there's no need to be afraid. There you go. So
I'm not even reacting to that.
I just had to say that. So what else was in the news? On the same day, 22nd December, when the song charted, well, Joe Strummer from The Clash, big sort of musical legend, he died on that day, sadly. So, that was a big moment. Lots of musicians seem to sadly die around Christmas time.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't have any statistical evidence of that, but it just seems to happen.
No, it just feels like it happens.
Or maybe it just resonates more if it happens at that time. But anyway, dear Joe, that was his last day, unfortunately. What else was in the news?
Bless.
On the cover of the NME were Coldplay, because Coldplay won Album of the Year because they had the Rush of Blood to the Head album. And they're on the cover of the NME having a nice little snowball fight wrapped up in fluffy jackets. Oh, nice and lovely.
Was that a nod to E17, perhaps?
I think so, because E17 are famous for their fluffy jackets. So, yeah.
Famous for fluffy jackets and jacket potatoes.
Jacket potatoes. One day we will tell you the jacket potato story if you're not aware of it.
Everyone knows it, surely.
Just hang on. Just hang on for that one, and we'll let you know about that. Right, so December 2002, Popstars The Rivals, big deal. Obviously, this is a massive TV show. It's Saturday night prime time, so it's huge, right? So it was taking over everything. But I thought, let's have a quick sort of recap of where the other people who were in the show who did not become the biggest girl band in the UK, what happened to them? So One True Voice.
What happened to them?
Yeah, what happened to them, right? So One True Voice, they were all expected to be the big winners, but they were comprehensively beaten by Girls Aloud. Like, they could not have been beaten more. So, not a good start for One True Voice. And it's fair to say it didn't go well for them. So, already in June 2003, one of the members, Daniel, he left the band and they had to cancel a tour due to poor ticket sales. And apparently they were dubbed in a poll. I don't know where the poll comes from, but they were dubbed Britain's worst group.
Do you know, I've got to say, I do feel a little bit bad for the boys, but I don't feel bad for Pete Waterman.
No.
I've decided I hate him.
Yeah, exactly. So in August 2003, they fully broke up without even releasing an album. What a shame. But, right, I can tell you this, though. They did have one really good song. And if you're a band and you can have one really good song, you've made it, right? That's more good songs.
In Martin's book, you've made it.
That's more good songs than I've ever made. And this song, right, is called, so really important that we get the exact wording of this. It's called Shakespeare's, open brackets, way with, close brackets, words. Which reached number 10 in 2003. And that is a really good song. YouTube that one, stream it if they're streaming it. Good song. And right, it was written by Rick Astley, no less. So maybe that was Pete calling in our favour. Yeah, saying, Rick, you're not doing anything at the moment. Go and help me out here, please. So at least they came through with one good song. So there you go. So the other group that were formed, so you know how Liberty X were the losers group from
yes, I do.
Popstars, and they were massive. They had massive hits and superseded Hearsay. Well, Clea, they did not supersede Girls Aloud, and they were the group formed by the losers from Popstars, the rivals. So the ones that were not chosen to be in Girls Aloud. So Chloe, Lindsay, Emma, and Amy. Can you see what they did there? Clever, isn't it? Yeah.
That's what we used to do in like primary school when you'd be like, what should our team name be for this group project? Let's just make a word from our initials.
Yeah.
Sorry, girls.
Yeah. So, and they had very minor success. So I love this one. This is like the most like sort of naughties like number, like naughties hit. So this reached number 21.
Mm-hmm.
It was called Download It. I love releasing a song in 2003 called Download It. And that is a good, and that is a good song. That is a good song. And they released an album only in Russia, Eastern Europe, and certain countries in Asia, which is not specified online, and it was called Identity Crisis. And never to be heard of ever again, I think, unfortunately. Yep. The other one, so this is like the person who was closest to being in Girls Aloud, who also had a career. So Javine Hilton, super close to getting in Girls Aloud. She was like the last person.
She lost out to Sarah.
Yeah, the last person knocked out. But she did well on her own. So she had 4 top 20 hits. And, it's a bit of an underrated sort of minor pop legend now, I think. And she competed at Eurovision in 2005 with a real certified banger called Touch My Fire.
Are you easy coming, easy go? Whoa, come on, let the music grab you from your head to your toe. No need to rush, take it nice and slow. Feel that beat, get your groove on, get a move on. Whoa, yeah.
Go and stream.
I have no
Touch
memory
My
of
Fire.
that.
Go and stream that. It's a good song. You can take my word for it. If you think I'm
I do,
wrong,
I trust you.
If you think I'm wrong, you can hunt me down. But I think, definitely certified good song. But I've got no idea where she is now, though. So, Javine, if you listen to this, please get in touch. We want to know what you're up to. We want to know what you're up to. Right. Also, seeing as we're discussing 4 Northern girlies and an Irish one, yep, it's only right that we pay a visit to Weatherfield and give an update on the North's favourite soap.
It's my favourite part of the show.
Yeah, so in Coronation Street, it's Christmas time, and Gail Platt is having a lovely, lovely family Christmas with a really nice man that she married earlier on in the year called Richard Hillman. And there's absolutely nothing.
If you know, you know. If you know, you know.
Yeah, and there's absolutely nothing.
You know what's coming.
Nothing that is going to be bad. There's nothing to worry about whatsoever. Gail's having a lovely time going out Christmas shopping in this episode. They've bought lots of stuff. And they're going to be going to a pantomime, because you go to pantomimes at Christmas. And Richard, he's a nice guy. He's a nice, loving guy with his family. And he's deciding to treat them all to a pantomime. And she says, "Oh, you spent far too much money on these tickets, Richard. It's far too much. It's more than we can afford." And Richard says, "Oh, no, it isn't." Wow, what a fun guy. What a fun guy he is.
You, Richard.
Yeah. And then when you get to Christmas Day, Coronation Street, he shows what a fun guy is, where he was about to smother Emily Bishop to death with a pillow. Then he decides not to because it's Christmas.
Terror.
What a nice man. So
I would love to know the science behind why Christmas episodes of soaps have to be so dramatic and so traumatic.
Yeah, like poor Gail. Obviously, we're going to talk about Gail quite a lot. She's had quite the life.
Gail
as Gail
transcends time. She's the ever-present figure. She's more present than like God in pop culture.
Gail Platt is God, basically. Yeah. And if that's the case, then Richard Hillman is the devil. So there's the good duality going on there. So Richard Hillman, if you don't know who we're talking about here, Richard Hillman is one of the prime soap villains. And you've always got to have a big villain in soaps. And so he was a really dodgy guy. He was like doing fraudulent stuff in terms of money and trying to, get a lot of people with money, doing dodgy deals. And then that turned into like killing people. So he killed like 4 people or so. Really notorious villain. And in this episode on like the 22nd of December is the one that I watched. There's so many lines that are delivered to the camera in sort of cheesy, villainous way. Like he's talking to Emily just after he decides not to kill her. She wakes up on the couch and she's like, "Oh, Richard." He's like, "Oh, hi, Emily. I just wanted to check you're okay." And he's like, then he gives her a cuddle and like looks at the camera and says, "Look after yourself, Emily. Look after yourself." And then a few weeks later, he's hitting her over the head with a crowbar. So there you go. So that's Christmas in Weatherfield. A few issues going down. But here's another fact that's related to Coronation Street. So Sarah Hardin in Girls Aloud actually was in Coronation Street in 2005 as Joni Preston. There you go.
Makes sense. She's a Stockport native, so
who'd have thought it?
Weatherfield's only up the road.
And everything links together in the pop universe.
Everything comes back to Coronation Street.
Yeah, so there you go. Do you have any memories of this time though? December 2002.
The December 2002, I was 5.
Yeah.
I feel like I have vague memories of this show.
Oh yeah, I watched the show. I
think
watched the
that
show every week. Yeah, it was big.
I feel like this might have been when my brother was really young and we just moved into a new house. So my memory, I think it was this Christmas. Yeah, it must have been. It must have been Christmas 2002. And we had like no heating. And we had this alarm that went off all the time. And when we first moved in, like nothing worked. So we just had like pizza and porridge for like a week.
Oh,
And we all had to sleep in the same bed. Jesus Christ, this sounds incredibly bleak.
Bleak.
But, you know, at least we had Girls Aloud.
Yeah, Girls Aloud were saviours for you.
But the following Christmas 2003, oh my God,
Yeah,
Christmas 2003, I did actually receive this CD.
incredible.
I had the Sound of the Underground. It was the reissue, though,
Oh yeah,
the one
yeah.
with the better album cover that had the Freaky Friday song and the rest. And so basically, as a child, like as a baby,
Yeah.
and a toddler, I was obsessed with S Club 7.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but I was obsessed with S Club 7. I had as much memorabilia as I possibly could. I had like a birthday cake and everything that had S Club on it.
Amazing.
They were my first ever concert when I was like 3 years old.
Yeah.
So the natural progression from that was Girls Aloud, and I loved Girls Aloud.
So Girls Aloud were your band. They were yours from an
Yeah,
early age. Yeah.
yeah. From like the word go. Have strong memories of getting my little CD player out and Call Me Sophie Ellis Bextor because my kitchen discos were lit.
Yeah.
I had a
yeah.
disco ball and everything. Yeah. And then like me and my friends or like me and my cousins or whatever would like pick a member to be, and
Who were you
we
picking?
would do
I'd be picking Nadine every time if it was me. Yeah.
as a child, for some reason, I went for Kimberly quite a lot, but maybe I felt the affinity, the Yorkshire affinity.
Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, I also did in Christmas of 2003 a performance of Jump with 4 other girls at our school like Christmas concert.
Oh wow.
So I just want to put that in there.
Oh wow. That sounds incredible. So yeah,
There's photos,
yeah.
but there's no videos.
No videos. So you're safe. You're safe. So
I had a little Rah
yeah.
skirt on and everything. It's so cute. Anyway.
so I'm a little bit older than Abby, just tiny little bit, right? So I obviously remember
Yeah,
this
just a little bit.
Yeah,
Same differences. So when we get on this show and we're like, oh, here's like 2 different perspectives. It's actually like Louis Walsh and Pete Waterman. There's not that much difference, but there's a marked difference.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah. So I remember all this, and this sort of song was the kind of song that would make me like want to get more into like amazing pop, other than wasting time with like Star Sailor and terrible, boring indie stuff at the period. So this is like really was like a sort of revelation if you were like really in like sort of the indie music weeds. This was a song that would come out and it'd be like take you out of that into sort of the promised land of amazing pop music. So this is kind of what I remember during that period. The Christmas time when this came out, all I remember is I got a really good dartboard. So good. Loved that dartboard. And yeah, that's about it. That's about it. So let's get into the song though. Let's break down this song because it is an incredible song.
Let's talk about what captured my childhood.
Yeah, tell me what's so good about it. Yeah, tell me what's so good.
Where do we start? We've talked a little bit about Xenomania, so let's just get on with that part. So, as a little bit of a pop fact, so Xenomania were kind of known for these big like genre mashers where they would just like throw in everything but the kitchen sink into a song. So they would put like a load of different melodies in there. They would basically like write little bits of songs and then just like piece them all together and create this explosion of pop, which is exactly what Sound of the Underground was. This wasn't particularly common at the time. This was like, I don't know, maybe I'm looking at this through a lens of someone who's never known pop as anything different, but I feel like genre was very set in its ways up until this point. Am I right in thinking that?
Yeah, so like there's a quote from
like rock was rock, indie was indie, like hip hop was hip hop. Like, and then for Xenomania to come in and just kind of like pull all of these little bits from different places and create a pop song was like unheard of. So we have in Sound of the Underground, we have like the drum and bass beat, which is really prominent on like the original Brian Higgins version. Then you've got like that twangy like Mr. Lou guitar, and then you've got the vocal, which starts off a little bit Kylie and then is this huge party chorus. It's crazy. It's such a mad song.
Yeah.
I love it.
And it was a new way of like doing like pop music, and even for the band themselves, you know. So there's a quote from Miranda Higgins where she says they were kind of politely
Miranda
skeptical.
Higgins, you mean Miranda Cooper?
Oh, Miranda Cooper. Oh, God's sake. Too many names. It's hard to remember names. So Miranda Cooper, right? So she played Girls Aloud the song, and they were like, "Oh, we like our R&B and we like Mariah ballads. We thought we were going to get something like this." They were like, "What the hell do we do with this?" And then can open up their minds into like you could do pop in a completely different way. So because Xenomania were so inventive, like the girls kind of had no idea what the final song would sound like, and they record a few lines at a time, usually in sort of in different melodies. So they like to do lots of different melodies every songs, and it was all kind of mashed together. But slowly they kind of got used to that and worked together. And you can see as Girls Aloud's career progresses, things get in a way more weird and more inventive, but they coalesce into something sort of magical with so many sort of the most inventive pop songs that you can sort of ever hear. And it begins with this one.
When you get even just like into the second album, like they were so skeptical of like Love Machine when they first did it. They were like, what the hell is this? We can't release this. But there's also songs on there like The Show, where like every verse has a different melody, and then like the chorus doesn't even like the intro then becomes like the final chorus and stuff like that, where it's just mental. And then like into the third album you've got like Biology, which again there's so many like twists and turns to it. It's so good.
Yeah, and there's some quotes from the girls over the years that they've mentioned about the song. So give me some of them. What have they been saying about it?
So Cheryl kind of hit the nail on the head. She says like that the process created a sound that nobody could pinpoint. Nobody could say it's like so and so. It's very much Girls Aloud, which I think is very true. Same as Nicola had also said specifically about Sound of the Underground. It felt like we were doing something that was fresh for us rather than just doing an Atomic Kitten track.
Absolutely correct. Yep.
Yeah. And I think that became definitive for them. And they were probably very thankful in the end that they didn't just do an Atomic Kitten track.
Yeah.
And then if you'd been anywhere near TikTok in the last year, you'd probably heard that quote of Cheryl saying, "I just remember thinking, this is so edgy and so different. People are not ready."
I just remember thinking, this is so edgy and so different. People are not ready.
People are not ready.
She's talking about Sound of the Underground.
Yeah.
Like when you put that in context, it's so funny.
Yeah. People were ready. People embraced Girls Aloud in a massive way. And for every inventive thing they done, people were on that journey. They were like, yeah.
They were.
You're pushing
and it
music
went to
forward.
number one. Went to number one. Do you reckon you can give us an explanation why you think it went to number one?
So one of these songs was definitely going to go to number one. So that was the point of the whole show. So massive show. But nobody thought it was going to be the girls, but this song was literally just so undeniable. Another song was just so bad.
Mm-hmm.
So the boy song was the Bee Gees cover. It's not even a good Bee Gees song. It's a really, really bland, really boring song. And
let's get a clip of it as well.
Yeah.
Let's subject the audience to a clip of it.
Only like 10 seconds or so. This is so bad. This is so bad, this one, right?
This is One True Voice with Sacred Trust.
Sacred Trust.
I tell you, I can't wait another night for every secret that it so reveals. For you and I would get to know that it's real, that it's real. I follow my heart.
So, yeah, I think it became apparent sort of as soon as the songs came out that the Girls Aloud, they weren't going to be a vocal harmony group. They weren't going to do ballads, even though my favourite Girls Aloud song of all time is a ballad, and it's Whole Lot of History. And I'm going to tell you,
I don't know why you keep saying that.
I love that song so much. That is like, I reckon, right, I might have that song played at my funeral.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I really think so.
Fair enough.
I love that song so much. Beautiful song. So they could do ballads, right? And they could do them really well. But that wasn't sort of what they were known for. And what really brought sort of...
They were known for the bangers.
Yeah, what brought them to life and, was the combination of them and Xenomania and the fact that sort of Girls Aloud were quite sort of malleable. So, but after weeks of showing off their vocal talent on the show, because obviously a talent show, they were all singing live. They could all sing. They can all belt out. Like, if you look at Nadine, incredible voice. So maybe this track came as a surprise.
And they weren't doing... Yeah, when you're watching the show, they're not doing, like, easy songs. There's, like in the final, Nicola sings River Deep Mountain High.
Yeah, that is
Sarah's singing like
tough, yeah.
Sarah's singing like Anyone Who Had a Heart. Like, they're real big songs.
Yeah.
So it was really weird. Just like to go back to like the Pete Walkman thing, it was really weird that he was trying to insinuate that they had no vocal talent, or the fact that they were chosen for like looks instead of their vocals. Because it was there, like the evidence was there. The public were watching it every week.
Yeah. And I think this went to number one because it was just so fresh, and people were like, like some songs are just come out of nowhere and are so undeniable and hit you so hard, and it's like, wow, this is amazing. That it just blew everything else out of the water, because there wasn't really sort of a girl group doing what they'd done during this time. So Spice Girls were over, they were done. So Destiny's Child were filling the R&B market, but Destiny's Child were sort of obviously American and kind of remote, and then Beyonce was kind of...
And we're only a year off Beyonce's solo career as well at this point.
So Sugar Babes obviously had a period of time where they lost Siobhan and they got Heidi, and they were just kind of getting back on top and finding their feet. But maybe they're perhaps more focused on vocal harmony, and they were doing something slightly different than Girls Aloud. Working with Xenomania, but it was kind of different, and they were kind of just building up. And obviously, Sugar Babes and Girls Aloud would define sort of UK pop for the rest of this decade, pretty much. But this is the moment where Girls Aloud kind of came out strong, right out the traps. Amazing single.
Yeah.
Totally different than any sort of winner single that would come, like we mentioned. And this is a magic moment for number one record.
It really was.
And where are they now then? Where are they now? What's happened over the years to Girls Aloud? Tell me, Abby.
So there's been a lot of good things. But I think we're going to start with something that we haven't mentioned yet, but I feel like is essential when it comes to talking about Girls Aloud. Which is the fact that sadly in September of 2021, Sarah Harding passed away following a breast cancer diagnosis that became terminal. She was only 39 when she passed away. So I think it's safe to say that anytime we talk about Girls Aloud, we just want to honour Sarah's memory.
Absolutely.
Personally, I think it's been quite emotional seeing all these old clips. Seeing her be like, because she was like the party girl of the group, like she was like the heart and soul of the group, and seeing her be like really vibrant in her younger years, and being so passionate about it, and like she loved touring so much. She loved like performing live. I think she just loved being a pop star.
Yeah.
So it's been quite sad, I think, to have all of that taken away from her so young. I don't know. It's made me quite emotional. I think, being the optimists we are, we do want to celebrate all the achievements that the girls did have while Sarah was still with us.
What a legacy.
Because they have just hit their 20th anniversary as a group. We were talking a little bit about this earlier, but they didn't really do anything for the 20th anniversary. But I think that was maybe because things are a bit different now.
Yeah, and it's so bittersweet.
It's all very bittersweet.
And it's just so fresh and so raw that it only just happened. And it's not like a pop star who'd been away for years and years and years and years that was kind of faded in the memory. Like Girls Aloud, even though they weren't releasing music, they were so sort of present in the pop ether that people...
And they're all obviously still very close to each other. Like you still see them supporting each other's like endeavors outside of the group.
Yeah, there was no big
Um,
fallout. There was no. They just basically
No.
stopped making music. But
yeah,
yeah, they
it
were
just went on
still-
to doing other things. But yeah, I think, like you say, it was obviously still very fresh, and I think it's maybe, like you say, just bittersweet to have celebrated. So yeah, it was all kind of so fresh in their minds. But I think it was really sad that like I don't want to say didn't make it to the 20th anniversary, but that she wasn't there for it. Yeah, it's just really emotional. But in those 20 years, they did have a hell of a lot of success. So in their first 10 years, as a group, they had 20 consecutive top 10s. Do you know how mad that is? Their debut single went to number 1, and the following 19 singles they released also went top 10. 4 of those went to number 1. That is insane chart history.
Yeah, and these are all really amazing songs in their own right. And it's not like they were knocking them out. Like, see, like we
No.
talked about Stock Aitken Waterman, they would write songs in 20 minutes and release them, and it'd be really functional,
Yeah.
like put together in really sort of generic ways, just to get them out there as quickly as you can. Every one of those 19 songs is very distinct and inventive,
Mhm.
and is doing something completely different. And nobody has that legacy. Nobody does.
I don't think that Girls Aloud have a single that was released that is like less than an 8.
A Long Hot Summer.
I don't mind it. I think it's great. Does what
Yeah.
it needs to do.
Yeah, but no,
Um,
you're right. You are right.
But amidst those years, because they did after 2009, sorry, take a little break.
Yeah.
They famously won the Brit Award for Best British Single for The Promise
Mm-hmm.
with, we'll get a clip of Sarah's iconic, "It's About Time" put in there. Because it was about time. It
Of
was
course.
about time.
Can I just say, it's about time!
You said what she needed to say.
Of course.
But after that, Cheryl, who at the time was Cheryl Cole, went on to release some solo material. So she had a huge solo career, saw her have some number ones herself.
Yeah.
She went on her own solo arena tour. She became an X Factor judge. Cheryl, we will talk about her in depth one day. We'll probably do like a Fight for This Love episode. But she
Yeah.
was like in the late 2000s, early 2010s, in real nation sweetheart territory.
She was huge, yeah.
She was the woman.
Yeah, until she cruelly denied Gamu her opportunity in the X Factor.
What?
Yeah. Gamu Gate.
I have absolutely no idea what that is.
You need to right. Okay, we will talk about Gamu Gate when we talk more about X Factor. But yeah, look
Yes.
it up. Look it up.
But currently, she's in the West End play 222, A Ghost Story. Which she
Interesting.
got a bit of flack for, but she's in it. She's doing well, apparently.
Yeah.
And the other girls did go and see it the other night at its live premiere, I believe.
Ah, lovely. What are the rest
the
of
other
what are the rest of
girls-
those? What have they been up to?
So in their time, they did do their fair share of reality TV as well.
Yeah.
Kimberly went on Strictly Come Dancing. Sarah was on Celebrity Big Brother.
One Celebrity Big Brother, yeah.
Nadine was on I'm Celebrity. And Nicola was on The Masked Singer, who
Yeah.
also won. She won
Yeah.
The Masked Singer. In the meantime, Nadine moved out to LA. She owns an Irish bar over there called Nadine's.
Love to go.
which I
And wants
just
to
love.
finance that. Yeah.
Literally send us because
Yeah,
I need this in my life.
absolutely.
Nicola released an amazing solo album called Cinderella's Eyes. If you've never heard it, like, it's
So good.
so good.
Yeah, you could probably get
It
a
was
copy
so,
of it
like-
for 50p off Amazon or any other online retailer that you choose.
Yeah, really ahead of its time, really just like as forward thinking as anything Girls Aloud did,
Yeah,
but is
like-
also very distinctly Nicola. It's so good.
Bonkers pop, that's what that is.
Yeah. Please do another one. Please do another one, Nicola, if you're listening.
Yeah.
Sarah ventured into acting. As we mentioned before, she was on Coronation Street for a little while. She starred in a few British films. She was kind of like exploring a few different genres of film. She was getting into a bit of comedy, and she had a role in the St. Trinian's reboot,
Yeah.
where Ricky from Kaiser Chiefs also played her like rock star boyfriend in it.
Wow, I need to. I might watch that then. I might watch that. What a sell.
Kimberly, as a she came into singing because she was really into musical theatre. So she returned to her musical theatre roots, starred in Shrek the Musical, and then like the stage versions of Elf, Big, and most recently Sleepless in Seattle.
Wow.
So they're not doing bad for themselves.
Yeah.
And like we said, they're all still friends. They still support one another. And I guess all we can hope for is that their legacy continues, or they continue it.
Yeah, a beautiful legacy, and they will always be remembered as, you know, one of the greatest girl groups in history, just in the whole world,
Yeah.
and a really important sort of act in the history of British pop in terms of redefining what
Yeah.
pop could be.
And I think an interesting thing about Girls Aloud, I think it's quite common across like most like British pop groups, but for how prominent they were in the UK, they did not touch America.
Yeah, like I was talking to an American sort of pop fan the other day, and I was like, Girls Aloud are like on the really top tier of British pop acts in like history with anyone else, and they're like, surely not, it can't be. So I don't know, is it a thing that it's just, you know, that we love here in Britain that people in the rest of the world just can't get into,
Yeah.
or like what? I don't know what that is.
You find this sometimes, like a lot of Americans think that Year 3000 is a Jonas Brothers song, and I'm like, that's a busted song. And most recently, I've seen on Twitter a video. It's Miranda Cosgrove doing "About You Now," and like so many people are like, "Oh my god, this Miranda Cosgrove song is so good," and I'm like, put some respect on Keisha's name right now.
Yeah, our American friends,
was
we
like-
love you.
This
but
was Sugar Babes on their last legs, but I will still defend this as a Sugar Babes song.
yes, we love all our American
Yeah,
friends.
maybe
but educate
someone
yourselves.
just needs to cover. Maybe someone over there just needs to cover The Promise, and then maybe Girls Aloud will get their dues in the US.
Yeah, maybe if 100 Gex do a version of Something Kind of
Yes.
which I would absolutely
oh my
love.
god!
Which would be
Please
the perfect,
remix that,
would be the
Dylan
perfect
Brady, if
thing.
you're listening.
Yeah, Dylan Brady. Something Kind of that's what I want. You can even invite Charlie on to sing on it if you want. You know, that'd be
That'd be so sick.
that'd
You've
be-
thought about that before.
that'd be. I think about it every day. Every day I think about it. So yeah, so Girls Aloud, we established legends, undoubted. But we have to finally rank this song in our rating system. Out of 100, what are we going for with this one?
I'm gonna go 93.
You're going to go 93.
Yeah.
I'll go 93 as well. There you go.
Yeah. I think that it's such a landmark song in British pop, but I still think that Girls Aloud have songs that I would rate higher, but 93 is like a comfortable place.
That
to put
feels right, and that feels beautiful. Sort of way to sum up one of the most important bands and a landmark that we have to do in the show. There's no way we're doing a show like this and not talking about Girls Aloud. So yeah, what a legacy! And you know, hopefully this episode has honoured the legacy of Sarah, dearly missed,
Yes.
and just the band in general. We love you, and what an amazing song. So yeah, thanks for listening,
Thank
everyone.
you for listening.
Yeah. And you can listen to the show on the Dork Radio app if you have an app. It's really good. It's really cool.
Have an app.
If you have an app, yeah. And you can listen to all the songs that are going on, all the good songs. Not as good as Sound of the Underground, probably, unless there's a song. If there's a song out right now as good as Sound of the Underground, then tell me, please. But you can listen to other good songs. There's good stuff happening there. All the stuff that's going on Dork, you can find out about through there. You can listen to Down with Boring, our flagship podcast. You listen to that. You can also listen to this show on Spotify, on Apple Music, and every other place in the world. We'll be back next week, won't we, Abby? What can you give us?
Yes,
a
if you've
teaser?
made it to the end of this, if you've made it to the end of this mammoth episode, and
Yeah.
you think, I'll have another one of them, there is another one coming next week. It's another chart battle.
Have you got a teaser of what we're going to talk about?
Yeah, it's another
Real
chart
stuff?
battle.
This is an
Another
intense
chart battle between a former girl band member and an unknown British icon
Hmm.
who has also been mentioned in the show.
Interesting. Yes, this next one might be relevant to an old one as well. So there's some symmetry going on there. It's almost like we planned this thing out. almost. So thanks for listening, everyone, and enjoy your week. And we will catch up with you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Chart Attack is brought to you by Dork. It's hosted by Abigail Firth and Martin Young, and it's produced by Patrick Gunning. All chart data is sourced from the official Charts Company. You can follow us or get in touch across socials at Chart Attack Pod or via the Dork accounts at Read Dork and at Dork Radio. Thank you for listening.